The vast, celestial void shimmered with distant stars as the alien warships sailed into Earth's atmosphere. It had been a year since the first signs of their approach, an ominous, unexplainable disruption in communications across the solar system, followed by the arrival of the invaders. These creatures, known as the Zarkith, were like nothing humanity had ever encountered. Monstrous, towering beings with jet-black exoskeletal armor, the Zarkith looked like they had come straight from the depths of nightmares. Their purpose was clear: destruction. Their ships, enormous and sleek, stretched out like dark behemoths in the sky, blotting out the sun as they hovered over Earth's most populated cities. The governments of Earth, once the pinnacle of human civilization, scrambled in vain to mount a defense. Their weapons, nuclear, chemical, and biological, were useless against the Zarkith's superior technology, their shields impervious to any earthly armament. The world's leaders met in emergency sessions. Military experts, engineers, and scientists pored over data from the few skirmishes that had occurred, data that showed their weapons had no effect. The Zarkith, it seemed, were a race that had perfected war. Their sheer strength was enough to crush entire cities in mere hours, and their advanced technology rendered humanity's defenses as ineffective as child's play. Yet, within the war rooms and secret laboratories of Earth's hidden fortresses, a different kind of weapon was being devised. A weapon that would require the combined might of science, humanity's indomitable will, and the defiance of Earth's greatest warriors, humans themselves. At the forefront of this clandestine initiative was Dr. Elena Maris, a lead scientist specializing in human enhancement technologies. Years of research had given her the insight that humanity needed to fight back on its terms. Traditional weapons would fail, but what if they could create something else? Something on a scale so powerful, so unlike anything ever seen, that it could make the invaders tremble. The idea of the Titan was born in the darkest recesses of the Earth's highest command centers. It was not just a weapon, it was an evolution. The Titans would not merely be enhanced soldiers, but human beings transfigured into beings of immense physical power, faster reflexes, and heightened cognitive abilities. They would be able to withstand the might of the Zarkith's relentless attacks and, perhaps, strike back with a force that could level the invaders' fleets. The first Titan prototype was not without its flaws. The scientists and engineers worked tirelessly, tweaking the genetic code, advancing cybernetic augmentations, and developing energy-based combat technology. But there were risks, ethical and moral ones. The Titans, after all, were not simply super soldiers. They were human beings who had undergone extreme modifications. Would they retain their humanity after such transformations? Or would they become something else entirely? Tools, machines of war, bereft of emotion, family, and identity? As the research continued, the invaders' relentless assault grew more severe. The Zarkith had begun to deploy their most formidable weapon, the destroyers. Enormous machines of war that could raze entire cities in a matter of minutes, their weapons capable of eradicating anything in their path. They were fast, nearly impervious to most forms of attack, and operated with a coordinated precision that showed the alien invaders had planned for the destruction of Earth long before they ever arrived. Dr. Maris knew it was only a matter of time before the Earth's defenses would crumble entirely. In a private meeting with her most trusted colleagues, she delivered the grim truth: humanity's survival now rested on the success of the Titan program. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," she told them. "We're fighting for the soul of humanity." The first of the Titans, Project Titan 1, was ready for activation. His name was Jonas Cruz, a former soldier who had volunteered for the experimental procedure. Jonas was a man who had lost everything: his family, his home, and his world to the Zarkith's invasion. The scientists had chosen him for his unparalleled skill, his resolve, and his unyielding spirit. Jonas stood before the chambers of the Titan program. His body was now a blend of organic and synthetic, muscles reinforced by carbon fibers, neural interfaces embedded into his skull, and a bioarmor suit that covered his entire body, granting him the power of 100 men. His heart raced as the final countdown to his transformation began. A sense of unease tugged at his mind. Could he truly do this? Could a single man, no matter how enhanced, stand against the might of the Zarkith? He was about to become Earth's last hope, the symbol of humanity's defiance. But deep down he couldn't shake the question: was he still human? As the chamber doors sealed, Jonas took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. And in that moment, as the technological hum of the machine filled the air around him, Jonas knew that he would either change the tide of war or become another lost soul in the dust of history. The roar of humanity's greatest weapon was about to begin. The cold, sterile air inside the lab was thick with tension as the countdown continued to tick down. Dr. Elena Maris stood across from Jonas Cruz, her hands shaking slightly as she monitored the data streaming in from every screen. She had seen the countless tests, the prototypes, the failure after failure, but this moment was different. This was the first true Titan, a culmination of years of sacrifice, of science bending the very limits of what it meant to be human. Yet, in her heart, she couldn't suppress the whisper of doubt. What had they done? Jonas was no longer simply the soldier who had volunteered for the program. He was something greater, something transcendent, but that didn't make the procedure any easier. His body, previously an ordinary shell of flesh and bone, now contained the raw, synthesized power of Earth's mightiest weapon. The transformation had already begun. Cybernetic augmentations that linked directly into his nervous system, bioengineered enhancements that would amplify his every muscle, reflex, and sense. But the human aspect, the soul, the mind, remained intact. At least that was the hope. Jonas's mind swirled in a mixture of fear and determination. His muscles ached from the procedure, from the invasive surgeries and neural interfaces that were being grafted into him. The physical discomfort was temporary, but the mental toll was something different. He had been prepared for pain, but he had not been prepared for the isolation. The Titan program had cost him his sense of self. He was now a weapon, no longer just Jonas Cruz, the man who had once loved and fought for his family. Jonas, Dr. Maris's voice echoed through his thoughts. Are you ready? The question felt like a finality. As if, once answered, there was no going back. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady but betraying the turmoil beneath. His heart pounded as he looked out at the observation window, where his comrades, along with Earth's highest military officials, anxiously watched. The countdown finished. For a moment there was silence, an eerie, unearthly quiet that hung in the air, before the transformation machine hummed to life. Jonas could feel the power surge through him, his body twisting, bones realigning, cells regenerating faster than his mind could comprehend. His vision blurred for a second, but then it sharpened, the world now crisp and clear in ways that felt unnatural. Every muscle in his body pulsed with energy, every fiber vibrating with new strength. The suit of bioarmor clicked into place around him, a second skin of indestructible alloys woven with nanotechnology. His hands clenched, and in that moment he realized the power that coursed through him. His senses were heightened, his hearing sharp enough to detect the faintest whisper, his eyes could pick out the smallest details, even across miles of terrain. And his body, his new enhanced body, felt as if it could shatter mountains with a single blow. But the questions returned. Who am I now? His head swam, an artificial interface connecting him to the Titan systems, feeding him knowledge, tactics, and mission directives. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a living weapon, bound to fight for the survival of the human race. But deep within him, a strange hollowness grew, the cost of his transformation settling into his bones like a heavy weight. Jonas, Dr. Maris called again, her voice cutting through his disjointed thoughts. Can you hear me? He nodded, a slow, deliberate motion as if coming back to himself. Yes, his voice was a low rumble, deeper now, the resonating tone of power shifting through his throat. I hear you. The rest of the team moved toward him, their expressions filled with awe, but also fear. He could feel their gazes piercing into him. It was one thing to create a weapon, but another to stand face to face with what that weapon had become. Jonas knew what they were thinking. He could sense it in the subtle shifts of their body language, the way they hesitated before meeting his eyes. He was no longer a man. He was the future of Earth's resistance, a living legend in the making. Dr. Maris took a step forward, her expression both proud and conflicted. You are humanity's hope now, Jonas. We are with you. We all are. Jonas said nothing in response. The weight of her words settled over him like a cloud, heavy and suffocating. His mission was clear. He would fight and conquer the Zarkith, but at what cost? Could a man truly remain a man when stripped of everything that made him human? But before he could voice his thoughts, a message came through the Titan program's communications channel, shattering the tension in the room. We've detected a new wave of Zarkith warships, the voice of a military officer crackled through the speakers. They're descending and they're bringing their full arsenal with them. We need you now. The call to action was all Jonas needed. The questions, the doubts, he would deal with them later. For now, Earth's greatest weapon had one purpose: to fight. Let's go, Jonas said. The rumble of his voice echoed through the command center as he turned toward the massive bay doors. The world was waiting and the Titans had just been unleashed. Jonas Cruz stood at the edge of the hangar, his enhanced senses alive with the hum of energy weapons and the rapid steps of soldiers rushing to their posts. He could feel the tension in the air, the buzz of anticipation crackling through the base as Earth's last hope prepared to face the enemy. Above them, the dark shadows of the Zarkith warships filled the sky, their ominous silhouettes blotting out the stars. The largest of them, a massive destroyer, loomed ominously, its purpose clear: annihilate. The Titan exosuit that enveloped Jonas was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Powered by a fusion core that thrummed with contained energy, the armor's surface shimmered with nanofibers, giving it an almost liquid quality. Each step Jonas took sent a ripple through the floor, the weight of his new form making him feel like a walking mountain of destruction. Yet, as the hangar doors began to open, revealing the vast, war-torn landscape beyond, Jonas felt something he had not expected: a wave of calm. The scientist in him wondered why, but the soldier in him understood. He had been forged for this moment. His mind, now augmented, could think faster, strategize with precision. But his body, the raw, devastating force of it, was not just a weapon of war. It was his means of survival and the key to Earth's victory. Jonas, Dr. Maris's voice crackled through his internal communication system. We've got a team of X-Strike fighters inbound, but they'll only hold the Zarkith off for so long. Once their destroyer moves into strike range, they'll need you to engage directly. Jonas didn't respond with words. His mind was already calculating his approach, his enhanced perception reading the movements of the Zarkith warships with frightening precision. The X-Strike team, Earth's most advanced fighter pilots, were already in the air, circling above the battlefield, launching high-speed missiles and laser barrages in desperate attempts to drive back the invaders. But they were outmatched. No matter how skilled, no matter how advanced their technology, they were still human. And the Zarkith had already demonstrated they could withstand everything Earth had thrown at them. The first volley of enemy fire lit up the sky. Energy blasts rippled from the destroyer's weapons, impacting the ground in a blaze of fire and smoke. The X-Strike fighters twisted and dove, narrowly avoiding the blasts, but it was clear, the Zarkith were not just here to conquer. They were here to crush. Jonas's heart quickened, but his breathing remained steady. His senses flared, his body moved instinctively. He took a single step forward, and the Titan suit reacted, the kinetic energy from his movement propelling him into a sprint. He shot out of the hangar with the force of a freight train, the earth beneath him cracking as he surged forward. The battle had begun. Jonas's first target appeared before him. A swarm of Zarkith's assault drones, small, spider-like machines with sharp talons and bladed limbs, moving at breakneck speed. They were sent ahead to harass the humans, to test their defenses. Jonas didn't hesitate. He reached out, his hand closing around the nearest drone in a grip that would crush a car. With a single, fluid motion, Jonas hurled the drone into the air. It exploded in a shower of sparks, but he was already moving, shifting into a combat stance, his body flowing like a predator's. His fists, enhanced with unthinkable strength, hammered into the remaining drones, each blow sending them flying like ragdolls. He was a storm of destruction, faster than anything his enemies could respond to, and more powerful than they could imagine. His thoughts were clear, calculated. Each movement, each punch, was a choreographed dance of war. The battlefield, once a place of fear and chaos, had transformed. The humans, watching from their command posts, saw the tides begin to shift. The drones fell in waves, but the Zarkith were not done. Their larger, more deadly forces emerged from behind the destroyer, heavily armored shock troops, towering behemoths with glowing, crimson eyes and massive energy-based weapons. Jonas could see them coming, hundreds of them emerging from the shadows like a nightmare-given form. Each of them was a walking juggernaut of alien strength, their armor nearly indestructible, their weapons capable of melting through anything Earth could muster. But Jonas wasn't afraid. He was ready. He charged toward the first line of aliens, his Titan suit's boots pounding against the earth with a sound that rattled the very atmosphere. The first Zarkith soldier fired a blast from its shoulder cannon, the energy beam slamming into Jonas's chest. The impact should have knocked a normal man back, but Jonas stood firm, his bioarmor absorbing the energy. The force rippled across the suit, but he didn't stagger. Instead, he raised his arm and ripped the energy cannon off the alien's shoulder with his bare hands. The Zarkith soldier gaped at him in disbelief before Jonas swung the weapon back in a wide arc, slamming it into the creature's skull with the force of an explosion. The soldier crumpled under the impact, but Jonas didn't stop. He moved on to the next, his body a blur of movement, his strikes faster than the eye could follow. The clash was brutal, a test of strength between two races, one more advanced and the other driven by desperation. But as the minutes ticked by, Earth's forces began to realize the impossible. The Titans, humanity's greatest weapon, were winning. One Titan, Jonas Cruz, was taking on scores of these invincible creatures and emerging victorious. The X-Strike pilots, witnessing Jonas's unrelenting onslaught, felt a surge of hope. They swooped in to provide air support, laying down barrages of fire that whittled away at the enemy's ranks. But Jonas's battle was far from over. The destroyer's weapons fired once more, and this time the blast hit too close. The shockwave sent Jonas sprawling to the ground, his vision momentarily clouded. For the first time since the transformation he felt pain, a raw, deep sensation as his body absorbed the damage. But even as his suit recalibrated, his heart remained resolute. This is just the beginning. Jonas rose to his feet, his eyes burning with fierce determination. The destroyer loomed in the distance, but he would not let it stand. This was his fight now, and he would not back down. With a roar that shook the heavens, Jonas Cruz, the Titan, charged toward the destroyer. And Earth's greatest weapon was about to face its greatest test. Jonas's massive form rocketed forward, his Titan suit's boosters flaring to life as he propelled himself across the battlefield. The destroyer was still a mile away, its hulking shape a distant silhouette, but Jonas knew that every second counted. Earth's entire future rested on him stopping that warship, and no force, no matter how powerful, would make him hesitate. His mind was laser-focused, the data from his internal systems flowing in real time as he calculated every possible move. The destroyer's weapons were far too powerful for Earth's conventional arsenal to handle, and its shields were a near impenetrable wall. The only option was to get close enough to plant himself directly in its path and make the attack personal. As he neared the warship's perimeter, the Zarkith defensive forces reacted with terrifying speed. A fresh wave of ground troops, even larger and more ferocious than the previous wave, swarmed toward Jonas, their plasma blades and energy cannons raised in unison. The ground beneath him rumbled as hundreds of heavy footsteps marched in time, a sea of armored alien soldiers closing in from all directions. Jonas didn't flinch. His arms extended outward, and with one swift motion, he grabbed a massive energy cannon that one of the approaching Zarkith was wielding. Without a moment's hesitation, he swung the cannon like a club, crashing it into the side of the alien's face. The creature crumpled in a heap, but Jonas wasn't done. The Titan suit responded to his every thought, its hydraulic muscles working in perfect synchronization with his, as he tore through the advancing horde. Every swing, every punch was a devastating blow. Jonas's fists connected with the aliens' bodies with the force of meteors, and they fell in droves, their bodies crushed under his relentless assault. But they were countless, more were coming. And Jonas knew that the longer he stayed here, the less time he had to reach the destroyer. His feet dug into the dirt as he launched himself into a wild sprint, crushing enemy after enemy beneath his boots. The world became a blur of motion as he flew toward the massive warship, his goal now crystal clear. Nothing would stand in his way. At the edge of the battle, Dr. Maris watched with bated breath, her eyes glued to the screens in front of her. The data coming in showed that Jonas was cutting a swath through the Zarkith forces, his incredible power and speed overwhelming the aliens. But there was no time to celebrate. The destroyer's massive energy cannon was charging up, preparing for another devastating strike. If Jonas didn't stop it now, Earth's last hope would be gone. "Jonas, we've got intel. Another strike is imminent," Dr. Maris's voice came through his comms. "You've got to get to that ship now?" Jonas's breathing was steady as he spoke. His voice was like a low rumble, the sound of the storm in his chest. "I'm almost there." The destroyer's cannon was now fully charged. Jonas knew this was it, the critical moment. He had no more time to fight his way through endless waves of alien soldiers. The ground beneath him shook again as the destroyer's cannon unleashed its deadly charge, a blinding beam of energy arcing toward Earth's defenses. Without thinking, Jonas did the only thing he could. He launched himself directly into the blast's path. The beam struck him head-on, a violent explosion of light and sound that obliterated the area around him. Earth's defenders, humans, X-Strike pilots and soldiers alike, watched in horror as the massive energy blast engulfed Jonas, obscuring him from view. "No?" Dr. Maris screamed into her comm, her hands trembling as she looked at the feed. The Titan, Jonas, had been hit by the full brunt of the destroyer's weapon. There was no way he could survive that, was there? But then, through the smoke and haze, a figure emerged. Jonas's silhouette, massive and glowing with energy, stood tall amidst the destruction. His bioarmor was scorched, parts of it cracked and charred, but he was standing. Alive. The Titan was still standing. The force of the blast had sent shockwaves through his body, rattling him to his core, but his augmented systems had absorbed the impact, rerouting power to critical areas and stabilizing him. His armor had taken the brunt of the hit, but Jonas himself, his very will, was unbroken. With a roar that could be heard for miles, Jonas sprinted forward again, his legs moving like engines of war. The alien troops that had been sent to guard the destroyer barely had time to react as he barreled through their ranks. His fists were blurs of destruction, pulverizing anything that came close. At last, Jonas reached the towering warship, his every muscle aching from the previous assault. He could feel his energy reserves draining, but there was no turning back now. The destroyer was just a few hundred feet away, and its weapon systems were already powering up for another shot. In a single leap, Jonas soared toward the ship's surface, landing with a thunderous crash. The sheer force of his impact sent ripples through the destroyer's outer hull, and cracks spider-webbed across its massive exterior. Jonas wasted no time. He extended his arm, activating the built-in plasma cutter from his suit. The blade of concentrated energy hummed to life, and he began to carve through the alien armor as if it were paper. But as he worked, something unexpected happened. The hull's interior began to glow. Energy readings spiked. Something was wrong. Before Jonas could react, the ship's internal defenses activated, and a massive blast of energy erupted from within. The explosion threw him backward, sending him tumbling across the battlefield. The blast was far stronger than anything he had experienced before. Jonas lay there for a moment, dazed and on the edge of consciousness. The world seemed distant and fragmented. But then, deep in his mind, a single thought cut through the fog. Not yet. I'm not finished yet. He pushed himself to his feet, every muscle in his body protesting, but he refused to give in. The destroyer had just revealed its true power. This was the final test. Jonas had come this far. He had survived the impossible. Now he would finish the fight. Jonas's body was a battlefield. His enhanced muscles ached under the strain of constant combat. His mind buzzed with the steady hum of his suit's power systems and the constant flow of battlefield data. He had been through the fire and emerged from it, but the fight was far from over. The destroyer had shown its true hand, and now Jonas stood at the very heart of the alien juggernaut, facing down a threat that was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The energy from the ship's internal defenses had been devastating, knocking him off his feet and sending shockwaves through the entire battlefield. But Jonas had refused to stay down. His suit had adapted, its nanotechnology healing the damage quickly, but the lingering pain was a reminder of how high the stakes were. Earth's survival depended on him defeating this ship. And despite the destruction, despite the overwhelming odds, Jonas knew that he could not fail. He stood before the destroyer's breach, the massive hole he had carved in the outer hull glowing with energy. His internal systems quickly analyzed the new threat. The ship's core was now vulnerable, but heavily protected by a dense shield of alien technology. There would be no easy way in. Jonas clenched his fists. I didn't come this far to stop now. With a grim determination, he sprinted forward, leaping over obstacles and wreckage as the remaining Zarkith soldiers regrouped and attempted to intercept him. Their weapons fired in unison, beams of deadly energy slicing the air toward him. Jonas barely had to think. His reflexes, augmented far beyond human limits, reacted before the thought even entered his mind. He weaved through the blasts, each step calculated, each move precise. He reached the outer perimeter of the ship's core defense in moments. The shields were powerful, alien technology at its peak, designed to prevent anything from reaching the heart of the warship. Jonas had encountered such tech before in the earlier battles, but this was different. This wasn't just a shield, it was a defense system that operated on a quantum level, continuously adapting to any threat. Jonas's Titan suit was more than just a weapon. It was a living machine designed for this very moment. As he reached the barrier, a surge of energy pulsed through the suit's neural interface, and he could feel the connection, the synchronization of his body with the system, taking hold. Time to adapt. His suit's interface connected with the alien shields on a deeper level, using its quantum processors to begin analyzing their energy signature. The connection was tenuous, and Jonas could feel the strain on his mind as the alien technology resisted his efforts. But this wasn't the first time he'd been up against a system that fought back. Every fiber of his enhanced body fought the system's resistance, every synapse firing with more intensity as he pushed forward. The ship's core shield flashed brighter, a storm of energy clashing against Jonas's Titan suit, but he held firm. His suit's energy reserves began to deplete, but he pushed on, his mind locked in. Sweat dripped down his brow as his heart raced, the magnitude of the task at hand becoming ever clearer. If he didn't breach the core in the next few moments, the ship would charge another weapon, and Earth wouldn't survive. Jonas grit his teeth. I have to win this. For everyone. With one final mental push, his suit synced completely with the alien shields, and he unleashed all of his power in a single concentrated pulse. The impact was deafening. A bright shockwave of energy exploded outward as the barrier shattered in a dazzling display of sparks and electrical arcs. For a moment, everything went still. The battlefield fell silent. Jonas stood there, panting, his body on the edge of collapse, but the path was clear. The core was now exposed. Jonas took a deep breath, his enhanced lungs filling with air. He adjusted his stance, recalibrating his suit's power systems. He could feel the weight of his mission pressing down on him. This was it. The final step. The core was heavily fortified, but with the shield gone, he was now free to finish the job. As he moved forward, the last of the Zarkith forces converged, their remaining soldiers charging at him with ferocity and desperation. They could sense the danger. They knew what would happen if Jonas reached the core. Their plasma rifles fired in unison, but Jonas was ready. His Titan suit reacted instinctively, its armor flashing to life with defensive shields that absorbed the barrage of incoming fire. With each step, he tore through the ranks of alien soldiers, his movements a blur of calculated destruction. The remaining Zarkith commanders sent their last wave of warriors, but Jonas was unstoppable. His strength was limitless, his resolve ironclad. The aliens knew this was their final stand, and they were giving everything they had. But they had underestimated humanity's greatest weapon. They had underestimated Jonas Cruz. Finally, he reached the heart of the destroyer, the core of the alien ship, pulsing with energy. It was a massive structure, alien beyond comprehension, but Jonas wasn't here to understand it. He was here to destroy it. He planted his hands on the core, his suit's power amplifiers surging to their maximum. The Titan suit hummed with energy as it drew on every available resource, every ounce of power that could be spared. His body was ready, but his mind was already calculating the last step. With one final command, Jonas activated the suit's overload sequence. A violent burst of energy tore through the core, and the ship began to tremble. Sparks flew from every angle as the power surge escalated. The core shuddered as if alive, but it was too late. Jonas's final strike had triggered the ship's self-destruct sequence. No turning back now, Jonas muttered to himself, stepping back as the countdown began. The entire destroyer trembled as if it was screaming, its energy reserves unable to hold back the critical mass that Jonas had unleashed. The ship began to rupture, its outer shell cracking and breaking apart. Jonas stood at the heart of the destruction, his body battered but unbowed. The power of the destroyer was beginning to destabilize, but Jonas knew that he had only a few moments before the entire warship would be obliterated. He turned, and with every ounce of strength he had left, he launched himself into the air, propelled by his Titan suit's final burst of power. The explosion behind him was deafening, a cataclysmic burst of light and sound that consumed the entire ship. Jonas was flying blind, but his enhanced systems knew the way. His trajectory was perfect. He could see the horizon, Earth, his home, his world, getting closer with each passing second. And as the destroyer's final explosion sent shockwaves across the battlefield, Jonas Cruz, the Titan, was free. The sky burned with the aftershock of the destroyer's explosion, a blinding cascade of light filling the heavens as the alien warship was consumed by its own catastrophic detonation. The shockwave reverberated across the battlefield, sending plumes of smoke and debris spiraling into the air, but Jonas Cruz, the Titan, was no longer there to witness it. His body plummeted toward the earth, his Titan suit's thrusters firing to slow his descent just in time. The world below was a blur, but Jonas's mind was clear. His mission had been accomplished. The Zarkith threat, the overwhelming force that had loomed over humanity for so long, had been destroyed. He had done what no one thought was possible. As he neared the ground, he deployed his emergency landing systems. The suit's thrusters flared again, slowing him to a controlled drop. His boots hit the dirt with a resounding thud, the impact shaking the earth beneath him. The ground cracked as if the very planet itself was acknowledging his presence. Jonas stood motionless for a moment, letting the world settle around him. His suit was battered and scorched, but it had held up. His mind felt as sharp as ever, though his body screamed in exhaustion. The war was over. Earth had won. But the fight had taken its toll. The survivors on the ground, the remnants of Earth's forces, began to filter through the smoke, their eyes drawn toward the massive figure standing amidst the devastation. They had seen the explosion, felt the shockwave. They had thought Jonas was lost, gone like so many others who had given their lives to this war. But now they saw the truth. The Titan had survived. "Is it over?" a voice called from the smoke. It was Dr. Maris, her face smeared with dirt, her eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and hope. Jonas turned toward her, his expression unreadable beneath the scorched helmet. But when he spoke, his voice was steady, unwavering. "It's over." The world seemed to pause in that moment, as if the entire planet held its breath. Then the air filled with a deafening roar of cheers and cries from the soldiers and civilians alike. Earth's greatest weapon, its savior, had returned. Humanity had triumphed, and the terror that had haunted them for so long was now a fading nightmare. But as the celebrations erupted around him, Jonas couldn't help but feel the weight of the sacrifice. He had been forged for this war, his body and mind altered beyond what any human could have been. The Titans had saved Earth, yes, but at what cost? He glanced down at his hands, massive, armored but trembling slightly. The power he had wielded was unmatched. But so too were the scars he carried. "We've lost so much," Dr. Maris said quietly, walking up to him. "So many lives, so much destruction. But we still have our future." Jonas nodded. He had seen what the war had done to Earth, the countless lives lost to the Zarkitha's invasion. Cities had been reduced to rubble, entire populations wiped out in the blink of an eye. The scars of this conflict would remain for generations. But humanity had endured. They had fought, they had risen from the ashes, and now they had the chance to rebuild. "We have our future," Jonas repeated softly, though his voice carried the weight of a man who had seen too much. "And we'll make it count." Dr. Maris studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "The world will never forget what you did, Jonas. What the Titans did. You gave us the strength to fight back." He glanced toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to rise. The first rays of light broke through the smoke and haze, casting a golden glow over the war-torn landscape. It was a new day. The world wasn't healed, far from it, but it was free. And that, Jonas realized, was enough for now. "We gave Earth a fighting chance," he said quietly. "Now we need to make sure it's worth saving." The ground around them began to stir as more survivors emerged. Military leaders, civilians, and other members of the scientific community gathered around Jonas and Dr. Maris, their eyes filled with awe. They had seen their world shattered, but they now saw hope in the form of the Titan standing before them. Jonas took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. The battle had been won, but the true work was just beginning. Rebuilding would take time, and the scars of war would take even longer to heal. But Earth had faced its darkest hour and survived. And the Titans, he and those like him, had helped forge that future. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. A small group of young children, faces dirty but bright with the hope of a world that had survived, approached him cautiously. They looked up at him, awe in their eyes, seeing him as a hero. Jonas bent down slightly, his massive form towering over them, but his expression softened. "Thank you," one of the children said shyly, looking up at him. "You saved us." Jonas smiled, a rare, genuine smile that felt strange on his face. He had never imagined such a moment, never imagined he would be seen this way. But he understood now. They were the future he had fought for. "You're welcome," Jonas replied quietly. "Now it's your turn to protect this world. To make it better." As the children ran off, Jonas stood up, the weight of the world on his shoulders, but his heart filled with a new sense of purpose. This was his legacy. And it was just the beginning. The Titans had roared. And Earth would rise again. The days following the destruction of the destroyer were a whirlwind of rebuilding and healing. Earth had endured the unimaginable, but the future was now within its grasp. Jonas Cruz, the Titan who had been humanity's last defense, stood at the heart of this new era, a symbol of strength, sacrifice, and unwavering hope. Yet, for all the acclaim and gratitude that poured in from around the world, Jonas knew that his journey, Earth's journey, was far from over. The war was won, but the scars of the conflict ran deep. Cities lay in ruins, ecosystems had been ravaged, and millions of lives had been lost. In the wake of the war, a monumental effort was underway to rebuild and restore what had been broken. But even the most advanced technologies could not repair the emotional and psychological toll the war had taken on humanity. Jonas watched as the people of Earth slowly started to piece their lives back together. Governments worked to unite fractured nations, humanitarian groups moved in to provide aid to the displaced, and scientists, including Dr. Maris, focused on restoring the planet's ecosystems. But for Jonas, it was hard to reconcile the image of Earth as it was now with the world he had known before the war. He found himself at the edge of the remains of what was once a vibrant city. The rubble around him was slowly being cleared, but the memories of the destruction were still fresh. Soldiers, civilians, and aid workers moved through the ruins, searching for survivors and remnants of lost lives. The air was thick with the scent of burnt metal and dust. But Jonas wasn't here to mourn what was lost. He was here to make sure the future wasn't wasted. Jonas? Dr. Maris's voice broke through his thoughts as she approached, her face marked by exhaustion but filled with determination. She had been working tirelessly on a project that might hold the key to humanity's survival and the planet's recovery. What's the news? Jonas asked, turning to face her. Dr. Maris smiled faintly. We've got results. The Titan program, it's going beyond the war now. We've found ways to adapt the technology to help us rebuild. It's going to take time, but we're optimistic. It's not just about creating weapons anymore. It's about creating the tools for recovery. Jonas nodded slowly, his mind still turning over the implications. The Titans, his kind, had been created for war, built to be humanity's ultimate weapon in the face of an existential threat. But now that the war was over, their place in the world was uncertain. Could they be something more than instruments of destruction? Could they help heal the planet they had saved? What does that mean for us, Dr. Maris? For me? Jonas asked. Your role isn't over, Jonas, she replied, her eyes filled with quiet certainty. You and the other Titans are symbols. The world needs you, not just to defend it but to lead it toward something better. We'll need to adapt just as you have. But you've already proven that humanity can face the impossible. Now, it's time to help us rebuild, help us lead in ways we never thought possible. Jonas looked at the horizon, where the rising sun bathed the planet in the soft glow of a new day. The war was over, but the work had only just begun. As much as he wanted to rest, to retreat from the heavy responsibilities that had been thrust upon him, Jonas knew that his legacy wasn't just about fighting the Zarkith. It was about shaping the world that came after. I've been thinking, Jonas began, his voice quiet but steady, about what you said. About leading. I'm not a politician, Dr. Maris. I'm a soldier, and all I know is how to fight. You're not just a soldier anymore, Jonas. You're a leader. A symbol of humanity's perseverance, of what we can achieve when we stand together, she said, her voice filled with conviction. The Titans represent more than just destruction. They represent the strength to endure, to overcome, and to rise from the ashes. We're going to need that strength to heal. Jonas didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood there, watching as the first rays of sunlight reflected off the shattered remains of the warship that had once brought devastation to Earth. The massive wreckage of the destroyer was now a symbol of victory, a silent reminder of the cost of peace. What's next? Jonas asked finally. Dr. Maris looked up at him, her gaze full of hope. We rebuild. Together. But we don't just restore what was, we build something better. The war taught us that we're fragile, but it also showed us the power of unity. We've lost so much, but we've gained something invaluable, the knowledge that we can overcome anything. You and the Titans are part of that future, Jonas? Jonas nodded slowly. It was a future he hadn't thought about until now. A future that wasn't defined by battle, by war, but by the promise of peace, of healing. And though it seemed like an insurmountable task, Jonas knew that if humanity had fought and won a war against an enemy like the Zarkith, they could rebuild, together. As the days passed, Jonas found himself at the center of efforts to reforge the world. The remaining Titans, once battle-hardened warriors, became the vanguard of Earth's reconstruction. Their technology, once designed for war, was now used to clear rubble, purify water, heal the land, and build the infrastructure of a new civilization. But more than that, they became mentors, guides for a new generation that would carry the lessons of the past into the future. Jonas and Dr. Maris worked side by side, guiding the Titans toward their new purpose. The world was changing, evolving, and it was clear that the future would not be defined by the mistakes of the past. It would be defined by the strength of humanity's resolve, the courage of its people, and the legacy of those who had fought to preserve it. And though Jonas could never forget the pain, the loss, and the battles that had shaped him, he now understood something crucial. The Titan had not been forged to fight alone. The true power lay in standing together, in unity. As Earth began to heal, Jonas Cruz, a warrior, a symbol, a Titan, finally understood that the true strength of the Titans wasn't in their power to destroy. It was in their power to create. To build a future worth protecting. And the world would never forget the Titans.